Meghan Markle, she may have stepped down from royal duties more than 5 years ago, but she keeps taking aim at the monarchy. The Duchess of Sussex has made reportedly at least half a dozen swipes at the royal family this year, and it's only June.
Nobody expected the drama of the night to come from Tyler Perry. But, oh, did it come. At the 25th BET Awards, an event known for fashion moments, musical surprises, and a little harmless shade, no one had their eyes on Tyler. He's the guy who usually stays out of trouble, avoids controversy, and uplifts others with quiet grace. And yet, he's the one who sent the entire internet in a meltdown. There were no theatrics, no names, no dramatic finger-pointing. But what he did say sent a message loud and clear. The kind of message that doesn't need to scream because the weight of it speaks for itself. And if you were paying attention, there was no doubt about who he meant. So how did we get here? Why did Tyler Perry, of all people, break the silence in a room full of stars? To understand it, we need to go back a few years to 2020. While the world was stuck indoors, video calling itself into exhaustion, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle were walking away from the royal family and into a new life in the US. What most people didn't know at the time was how unprepared they were for that leap. No house, no security, no clear plan. Enter Tyler Perry. He stepped in like a guardian angel, offering his $18 million Beverly Hills mansion, footing the bill for protection, and giving them privacy from the press. No interviews, no strings, just help. To the public, it looked like selfless generosity, a wealthy friend lending a hand to two people starting over. And honestly, for a while, that's exactly what it was. But during that BET Awards speech, Perry peeled back the curtain, calmly, softly, but with precision. He didn't need to drop names. He gave the crowd just one line. Some folks borrow blessings like they're owed, but never return the favor. 9 words. But they hit like a hammer. Online, it was like lighting a fuse. Everyone knew who he was talking about. And the reason it landed so hard? Because this is Tyler Perry, the man known for stories about forgiveness and faith, not messy celebrity drama. So if he was saying this, something must have been building for a long time. Sources say the final straw was Meghan asking to use Tyler's private jet, not offering to cover costs, not checking details, just a casual, "Can we borrow it?" And when Perry said no, because he felt like he was being taken advantage of, things got tense. Allegedly, Meghan didn't take the refusal well. And for Perry, that moment made something very clear. This wasn't about one favor. It had become a pattern. People had been warning Tyler for a while. People close to him, his staff, his fellow producers, even longtime friends. They all saw the signs. They told him Meghan wasn't just accepting help. She was collecting it, one favor at a time, like poker chips. And once she cashed in, you were quietly dismissed. No thank you, no follow-up, just done. But Tyler, he didn't want to believe that. He thought he was helping someone through a hard chapter. Genuinely. No press, no spotlight, just kindness. But the truth? It started adding up, and not in a good way. First came the Netflix deal, then the Spotify partnership. The big money started rolling in, and Meghan's public image just kept rising. But Perry? He noticed something missing. Gratitude, communication, a simple thank you. Not even a gesture to say, "Hey, let me return the favor somehow." Nothing. And that's why, when he took that stage at the BET Awards, it wasn't some impulsive outburst. It was years of silence breaking. His tone was calm, but his message? Brutal. He wasn't ranting. He was drawing a line. Some folks borrow blessings like they're owed, but never return the favor. 9 words. But it hit like a gut punch. Because when someone like Tyler Perry speaks up, someone who's built an empire on faith, family, and forgiveness, you listen. He's not a tabloid. He's not some salty royal aide leaking to the press. He had zero reason to stir the pot, which is exactly why it hit so hard. And suddenly, Meghan's carefully curated narrative, being misunderstood, being silenced, wasn't holding up the same way anymore. This wasn't coming from an enemy. This was coming from a friend. One who opened his home, his wallet, and his heart, and got nothing in return. Tyler wasn't trying to embarrass her. He wasn't being messy. He was just done. He'd reached his limit, and in that moment, the whole tone of their fairy tale shifted. What once looked like a rescue story started to feel more like a warning. But here's the real kicker, and it's almost too on the nose. Just days before Perry dropped that velvet-wrapped truth bomb, Meghan and Harry were out there quietly shopping around their next big project, a documentary, a whole rebrand, the post-royal image 2.0, big themes, freedom, power, reinvention. You know, the kind of thing that screams streaming award bait. They had the pitch deck, the teaser, the talking points, and Hollywood, it was still listening, at least until that speech. At one point, Meghan Markle was seen as the face of a new era, grace under pressure, a bold voice against outdated tradition, and a beacon of reinvention in a world desperate for change. But now, her name was starting to raise eyebrows instead of open doors. Brands that once clamored to align themselves with her message of empowerment and modern royalty were now hesitating. What used to scream progressive was beginning to whisper problematic. And in an industry like Hollywood, where image is everything and risk is calculated down to the decimal, hesitation is deadly. Meghan wasn't just controversial, she was becoming complicated. And complicated doesn't get deals, it gets silence. That's when panic mode kicked in behind the scenes at Archewell HQ. According to sources, it wasn't just a bad PR day, it was an all-hands-on-deck emergency. Zoom calls lit up late into the night. Crisis teams worked around the clock. People were spinning theories, drafting statements, and praying the headlines would shift. The goal? Redirect the narrative. Fast. They tried to flip the script, painting Perry as emotional, confused, maybe even vindictive. He's hurt. He misunderstood, they allegedly said. He's taking it too personally. It was a full court press to reframe the story, not as betrayal, but as a tragic miscommunication. And to do that, they pulled every lever they had. Offers of exclusive interviews, access to private footage, even whispers of a tell-all podcast. Let us explain, they pleaded to outlets. Let us set the record straight. But here's where it all backfired. Nobody took the bait. Not the legacy newspapers, not the cable news networks, not even the online gossip blogs that live for this kind of meltdown. Their silence was deafening, and worse, their disinterest spoke volumes. The more Archewell tried to spin the narrative, the more people began to ask, wait, why are they trying this hard? What are they hiding? Instead of controlling the story, they fueled suspicion. Meghan's image, once curated with surgical precision, started to crack. What once felt authentic now felt calculated. And if that wasn't enough, things inside Archewell were reportedly unraveling even faster. Tension, exhaustion, emotional burnout. Team members felt caught between personal loyalty and a creeping realization that the brand was losing its foundation. Some projects were reportedly stalling. Ideas lost direction. Morale dropped. It wasn't just a crisis, it was an identity collapse. And then came the moment they couldn't recover from. Tyler Perry's calm but cutting speech. With just a few words, he shattered the illusion. No shouting, no direct accusations, just enough truth, delivered with quiet dignity to change the entire atmosphere. And suddenly, no amount of PR maneuvering could fix what had been exposed. Because Perry wasn't just anyone. He wasn't a bitter ex-employee or a random critic. He was the man who gave Meghan and Harry shelter when no one else did. And now, he was the one saying, without saying, that he regretted it. that kind of reversal, it sticks, especially in Hollywood. And behind the scenes, more voices quietly emerged. People close to Perry who confirmed what many were thinking. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. He had stayed silent for years, out of respect, out of hope, but he had finally reached his limit. The part that hit the hardest? According to these insiders, Perry didn't just feel used. He felt like his friendship had been weaponized, not appreciated, not reciprocated, but strategically deployed. And that, in the end, might be the most damaging truth of all. Okay, so let's talk about the moment everything really started to unravel. According to one insider, Meghan didn't just lean on Tyler Perry for support. She allegedly used his name in a high-stakes business pitch without his consent. In early 2024, she reportedly told potential investors that Tyler was on board with her new media venture. Not in writing, not officially, just implied. She suggested that he was a silent backer, someone quietly supporting from behind the scenes. But the truth? He had no idea. When that news got back to Perry, something inside him snapped. This wasn't about gossip or a petty misunderstanding. This was about his name, his reputation, being used as a bargaining chip in a room he wasn't even in. And for someone like Tyler Perry, who built an empire on loyalty, discretion, and integrity, that crossed a serious line. That's when he made his decision. No more silence, no more playing nice behind the scenes. It wasn't a PR stunt, it wasn't a calculated move. This was self-defense, a way to protect his legacy from being pulled into a storyline he never agreed to be part of. And once Perry broke that silence, it was like the dam cracked wide open. More people started speaking up, quietly at first, but with growing confidence. Former staff, collaborators, producers, people who had been in the room, behind the curtain, and what they described was far from the carefully curated image Meghan had presented to the world. What once looked like a fairy tale was quickly unraveling into a warning about blurred lines, burned bridges, and the emotional cost of misplaced trust. One former assistant finally spoke out. Their experience? Not just demanding or intense, it was mentally draining. They described working with Meghan as walking on a tightrope. Every comment had to be filtered, every idea had to align, and disagreeing, that wasn't just discouraged, it was punished. Quietly, subtly, but enough to feel it. And it didn't end there. A producer who worked on Meghan and Harry's Spotify venture revealed that Meghan's obsession with image control suffocated the creative process. She didn't want collaborators, she wanted yes men, people who wouldn't challenge her, only validate her. Every pitch that didn't fit her narrative, killed. Every voice that didn't echo hers, silenced. It was her show. Everyone else was just background. And then came the silence, louder than words, from one of Meghan's biggest former allies, Oprah Winfrey. Yes, that Oprah. The woman who gave Meghan and Harry their explosive 2021 interview. The woman whose name alone could shift public perception. But when Tyler Perry's BET speech went viral and the internet erupted in speculation, Oprah said, nothing. Her team? Crickets. No press statement, no vague social post, not even a cryptic quote, just silence. And in Hollywood, silence is a message, because Oprah doesn't drop people with a bang. She drifts, slowly, carefully, quietly. And when she starts creating that kind of space, the entire industry watches. So when even Oprah didn't rush to Meghan's defense, people took note, and they started talking. Because here's the truth. Meghan spent years crafting a brand around resilience, liberation, and empowerment. She was the voice that spoke out, the woman who broke free, the survivor of royal repression. But now, the voices calling her out weren't tabloids. They weren't Twitter trolls or bitter royal aides. They were people who had been in her corner, people who helped her rise, people like Tyler Perry, who didn't just offer words, He gave her a home, he gave her protection, and in the end, he gave her the benefit of the doubt. Until she crossed a line he couldn't ignore. And that's what made this shift so real, so irreversible. Because when your own allies start walking away, and they take their silence with them, your story doesn't just change, it collapses. What began as subtle murmurs quickly turned into a quiet roar behind the scenes. A growing circle of former team members, producers, and insiders who had once chosen silence were now beginning to speak. Carefully, but candidly. These weren't random online rumors or anonymous gossip blogs. These were people who had been in the room, behind the curtain, watching everything unfold up close. And their stories? They were damning. As these accounts trickled out, something far more significant than reputation started to shift: the money. Meghan Markle wasn't just facing backlash in the court of public opinion anymore. Her brand was taking financial damage, and fast. Netflix, the streaming giant that had once backed the Sussexes with a headline-making multi-million-dollar deal, was reportedly reconsidering their long-term investment. Executives who were previously eager to align with Meghan's star power were now keeping their distance, worried that the glow was starting to fade, and worse, that it might burn them in the process. Insiders at Archewell, Harry and Meghan's media and nonprofit umbrella, described the shift as immediate and unmistakable. Internal projects were paused with no new dates on the calendar. Hiring freezes went into effect. Department heads who used to have budget approvals rubber-stamped were now told to run every dollar through layers of new oversight. The internal vibe? One former consultant put it simply: it stopped feeling like we were building something. It started feeling like we were defending something. Meanwhile, public opinion outside the office walls was catching up. The same social media platforms that had once championed Meghan as a feminist icon and royal rebel began turning on her. Hashtags that previously offered support were now dripping with sarcasm. People weren't just disagreeing, they were laughing. Comment sections filled with jokes, memes, side-by-side comparisons mocking her contradictions. And beneath all the humor, a serious message was forming. The public wasn't buying the story anymore. The image of Meghan as a misunderstood, mistreated figure standing up against powerful institutions? It was being rewritten as one of manipulation, strategic victimhood, and ego. And for someone who had built her brand on precision, consistency, and control, this was catastrophic. Because Meghan didn't just embrace branding, she was the brand. Every interview, outfit, charitable cause, production deal, every move was part of a broader narrative. The brave, silenced woman finding her voice. The outsider who spoke truth to power. The self-made woman rising from royal exile to media mogul. And for a while, that narrative worked. But now, that same story was being dissected, questioned, and flat out rejected by the very audiences that once believed in it. Even the media, once reliably supportive, was starting to pull back. Outlets that had written glowing features now hesitated. Behind the scenes, editorial debates reportedly grew tense. Was covering Meghan still worth the reader outrage? Was she still relevant, or just risky? And Meghan could feel it. According to close sources, she wasn't handling the fallout well. Internally, she was said to be spiraling, livid, frustrated, blindsided. But one thing enraged her more than anything else: Tyler Perry's silence. After his now infamous BET Awards speech, she allegedly sent him a flood of angry messages, accusing him of betrayal, of taking a cheap shot at her reputation, and of undermining the very legacy she was trying to protect. She demanded answers, demanded a response. But Perry, he didn't say a word, not that day, not the next, not even weeks later. And that silence, coming from a man once seen as her protector, her friend, her ally, was more powerful than any public clapback. It was deliberate, And it was deafening. By the time Tyler Perry's words echoed across social media, the damage had already been smoldering beneath the surface. What looked like a calm, composed speech was in fact the final act of a slow burn unraveling. And now, sources close to Perry were confirming what many had only speculated for years. This wasn't some impulsive decision. It was a carefully considered, emotionally heavy choice, one forged in silence, pressure, and quiet disappointment. According to those closest to him, Perry had been struggling with this behind closed doors for far too long. Years of extending himself, his home, his resources, his platform, his trust, only to receive little more than calculated gratitude and growing expectation in return. He had offered protection when the world turned its back, but instead of reciprocity, he found himself slowly drained. What he once saw as loyalty, he now realized had been exploited. And once he broke that silence, others followed his lead. A respected publicist came forward with a claim that Meghan's team had developed a reputation for strong-arming the press, reportedly blacklisting journalists who dared to ask unscripted questions or veer from the approved narrative. A former Archewell consultant said Meghan routinely dismissed strategic advice if it didn't align with her preferred optics. And then there was the brutal assessment from a past staffer who summed it up in one line: "It was a place where gratitude went to die." That single sentence spread like wildfire online, not because it was flashy or exaggerated, but because it struck a chord. Over and over, the accounts shared the same undertone: control, image obsession, and an emotional atmosphere that left people feeling used and discarded. There were no wild rants or tabloid theatrics, just consistent, quiet patterns of manipulation whispered by people who had nothing to gain and everything to risk. Even in Hollywood, a place where silence is currency and connections are guarded like gold, those whispers started getting louder. Executives reportedly began advising their circles to steer clear. In closed-door meetings, insiders joked that working with Meghan's team felt like playing chess with a mirror. Every move reflected back a rehearsed version of truth. There was no transparency, only spin. Then came the numbers, hard, undeniable data that didn't rely on gossip or anonymous quotes. Recent polling showed that public support for Meghan and Harry in the United States had plummeted by more than 30% in the past year alone. In the UK, where public opinion had soured long ago, their image was already beyond repair. But now, the ripple effect was global. Brands backed out quietly. Sponsorships went cold. Emails that used to be answered in minutes were now sitting unread in inboxes. The same power couple who once seemed unstoppable, royalty reimagined through the lens of modern activism, were now viewed as a risk. And Meghan's empire, the one she had meticulously built, brick by brick, with every profile feature, every podcast, every high-production video, it began to crack at its foundation. What once buzzed with momentum now felt like an expensive cautionary tale, one that producers, investors, and collaborators alike were choosing to avoid. And then there was Harry. While Meghan fought to reshape the story, Harry remained mostly silent. Some sources suggest he's working quietly behind the scenes, trying to stabilize what's left of their brand. Others believe he's simply worn down, mentally and emotionally exhausted from years of tension, with the royal family, with the media, and now with the unraveling of their closest alliances. But through it all, one truth kept echoing. Tyler Perry didn't shout, he didn't rant, he didn't even name names. What he delivered was something far more dangerous in a city like Hollywood: clarity. His speech was calm, deliberate, and devastating in its precision. Because it didn't just call out a moment, it revealed a pattern that so many had tiptoed around out of fear, loyalty, or convenience, now finally dragged into the light. And in a town where your name is your brand, and your reputation can make or break billion-dollar deals. Meghan Markle may be facing a reality more harsh than exile from the British crown, cancellation by the culture itself. Even royalty, it turns out, can be cast out twice.